And we are live. What's going on Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube Live? It is your man, Coach Rowe. Today is Wednesday. I'd like to welcome you to the first row. And if it is Wednesday, you should know what that means. It's time for the Wednesday word. That's Wednesday word. Jumping straight into it. Tonight's topic is how far you have come. As always, I like to share what I mean by my topic. So, what do I mean by my topic? How far you have come? What I mean by the topic, how far you can have come, how far you can come, how far you have come, is how you can completely change the circumstances of your life in such a short period of time in the big picture of things. Sometimes you can change things in a day, sometimes you can change things in a week, sometimes you change things in a year. But overall, in the big picture, that short period of time, a year in the comparison to the entirety of your life, is a short period of time. And it's amazing the amount of significant change you can make in that short period of time. So, as always, with the Wednesday Word, I have three tools tonight that I want to share with you. Three tools for the first row in regards to how far you have come. Let's jump straight into it. Tool number one, when it comes to how far you have come, is remember where you started. Oh my gosh. So I actually did a Wednesday word on this a couple years back called treating home as an anchor. And I talk about this concept of treating home as an anchor in my book, Fire Your Job, Hire Your Passion. And really, when I say remembering where you started, it's almost like don't forget where you came from, not in the sense of being anchored and attached to it, but as a point of reference from where you began. And because the reason why that point of reference, no matter where that point of reference starts, where you came from or where you started, is so important is because it allows you to be able to look back at a glance and see actually how far you've come. I talk about some pretty intimate stories of my own experience in my book. But one of the things that I've been able to really reflect on is like not just where I am today, which is a great place to be. It comes with its own set of challenges, but it's a great place to be. But also where I was, whether it was mentally, where I was financially, where I was emotionally at other times in my life, and being able to look at those moments, remembering those times when I was maybe in difficulties or maybe living check to check or maybe not in full, I don't want to say control, but not having the full aptitude to manage my emotions in those moments when I remember where I started and I'm able to look at them from a standpoint of where I am today. I'm able to see how far I've come, how much growth has actually transpired between those moments where I had immaturity or lacked maturity, to the moments where I'm more mature, not fully mature, more mature. Um, and the way I look at it is almost like a race, because this cycle that I'm in of maturing and growing and then going through another growth spurt and growing and then growing through another growth spurt and growing, is almost like being on a track. When you're running like a 400-meter or 800-meter race, when you run around the track, the start line is also the finish line. You go all the way around the track and you come back and you're at the finish line, which is the start line. And there's some things that have happened in that lap. Number one, you burn some calories and some energy, so you're probably huffing and puffing and tired. But you worked your muscles out. You expended energy in a way that caused your muscles to develop, that caused you to become faster, that caused you to have more endurance on running, and that caused you to be able to sprint for a lap, be able to sprint for a lap or maybe two, depending on what you're running. But in that place where you started, when you started at the start line and they said on your mark, get set, go, and you took off running, um, you didn't really spend a whole lot of time looking back at the start line while you're running. When we're in these sprints, and I'm going to actually refer to them when we're in these growth spurts in life, we don't spend a whole lot of time looking backwards at where we started from. And as such, because we don't spend a lot of time looking backwards, it's really easy to take for granted where you're at on the track, where you're at in the race. You're halfway through the race. It's easy to take that for granted because you're not looking back at the finish line saying, or the start line saying, oh man, I already gone through half of this. When we're, growing, whether it's in a relationship or we're growing, we're in school, we're growing, we're in a new job, we're growing just as individuals in our own personal and intimate spaces. When we're in that growth, it's really easy to not look back and remember where you started from. I think about the relationship that my wife and I have. 5 years ago, we didn't know each other. Is that right? Yeah, 5 years ago, we didn't know each other at all. And the growth that we have experienced over the last 5 years, or the last 4 years that we have known each other, um, has brought us to a place to where we're married and we're still moving forward and moving on and still growing and learning about each other in and of itself. But it's remembering where we started. We started off as strangers. We started off as two people who were like, let's go on this date and kind of see how things work out. And to be where we're at today, looking back at that starting point, to be where we're at today, there's been a significant amount of growth. And so when it comes to how far you've come, to really be able to grasp that, that's why this is the first tool. It's really about understanding where you started from, but not, or where you started, but not in the form, again, as an anchor, like, oh, I can't never forget where I came from. And I always have to be loyal and obligated to be connected to that. But it's more so a perspective of being able to look where you came from to experience the growth that you are now experiencing today. So that's tool number one when it comes to how far you have come. Tool number two about how far you have come really is about being in the present. It's maximize the present. The reason this is such an important tool is because the present is the only part of our life that we can actually impact right now. Like in this moment, this is the only moment that I'm going to have to impact my life right now. And so when it comes to how far you have come, it's really about understanding that in the present moment is where we are able to make those small decisions. They're small for that one moment because then the moment's gone and then you make the next decision. But it's where we make those small decisions and we chain together enough good decisions, and that is how we actually experience our growth. Think about how our cells multiply in the body. They say, I think it's every 7 years your cells have fully rotated out through your body. So everything is moved. You got brand new organ. It's not brand new in the sense of everything is brand new, but you get rid of your last cell, let's say at year 7. So by the time I'm 42. So by the time I'm 42, my body will have had this renewing of itself 6 times. And as we chain together, that multiplication process takes place, we get these new things, and those new cells create and promote growth in our body. So we might have more muscle mass, we might have more belly, we might have more, just whatever it may be. We just have more of what we have at the cellular level. And when we're maximizing the present, that's what we're doing. We are actually helping not our cells, but our decisions to multiply. And the more that we can multiply healthy, quality, well thought out, well-intentioned decisions, the more we can chain together those things, the further our growth will take us, the further we'll go in our growth. So when we do look back at that start line, I'm like, man, I remember when I was a knucklehead messing up and 5 out of 6 decisions were bad decisions, and I was only making one good decision. It was taking me a long time to grow. However, when we're looking at how far we come, when we're able to see in the present moment and maximize the present moment, we're truly maximizing it by making the best decisions that we can make in that moment. And so by making those best decisions, what we're doing is we are accelerating our speed, accelerating our distance from that starting line, from that starting point. And that starting point could have been yesterday. I don't care if, yesterday you had a bad day and you cussed out the mailman. I don't know what it may be, but you cussed out somebody. And now today you're trying to make better decisions. And maybe you're experiencing still some of those same frustrations, but you're trying to manage it in a much more effective way. So how far you came from yesterday to today, it may not be, leaps and bounds, but it's further than you were when you were at yesterday cussing people out because you were frustrated. So that is why, again, maximizing the present moment is so important, because not only is it important from the sense of making good decisions, but it's also important in the sense of, um, again, it's the space that we actually have input into. We don't have input into our past, and we cannot input into our future. We can only input energy, effort, good decisions, bad decisions. We can only put inputs into the present. And so when we're maximizing that present focus, we in meditation they call it mindfulness. When we're maximizing our mindfulness about the present moment, it allows us to take what we have in the now and actually create within that space. And I mean, there's times where like I will sit down intentionally and write out the Wednesday word. And it's the present moment that I have to say, okay, what do I want to talk about? What are the tools that I want to bring to the table? How have these tools impacted my life? What are some stories I can wrap around that to make those tools a little more understandable? That's me maximizing my present moment when I'm engaging with Wednesday Word content. And I look at the practice of maximizing that moment when I intentionally sit down to write the Wednesday Word. And I can see when I go to look back at how far I've come from when I started off telling a story of an experience that I had about being a father to the fatherless, the very first Wednesday Word. I don't even know if it was a Wednesday, but I think it was. Telling that story to where I am today with the first row and the Wednesday Word and the template that I use to share stories, tools, lessons, and help people grow and develop. So that's why maximizing the present moment when it comes to how far you have come is so important. It's so critical to be able to engage with the present, because again, you can look and reminisce on the past, but you can't change it. You can look to the future and be hopeful of it, but you're not there yet. So you can't really impact that either. The only moment you're going to have to impact is the present. So make sure you're maximizing the present. And then tool number 3, when it comes to how far you have come, is acknowledge and appreciate your growth. Man, I feel like many of us we don't give ourselves credit for who we are evolving to be, who we are evolving to become. We don't give ourselves credit for that. And when you are not acknowledging and appreciating growth, it's really easy to take growth for granted. I always liken this to when I first started going to the gym. There were some exercises, just some functional exercises that I started doing to get in shape and in condition to be able to do the workouts that I wanted to do. And I remember my workout partner and we would go to the gym and we would be doing all these kinds of like crazy workouts when we finally got stronger. And we were talking like I don't know, it was a year ago, maybe a couple months ago, about, man, do you remember when we used to go to the gym and we had this exercise where we took a bench press bar, we would bench press and sit up off of a decline bench press at the same time and raise the bar over our heads. And we would do it like 3 sets of 15. I tried to do that maybe, I don't know, 6 months ago. And I was like, I can't do this no more. I just got to work my way back up to being able to do that. But it's because I took for granted the physical strength that I had from being consistent in the gym, from being structured in the gym, from being organized, from being challenging myself in the gym, from trying new workouts, from reading exercise magazines. Because I took all that stuff for granted, there's now some things that I had grown into that I no longer have access to. And if I do want to have access to them again, I'm going to have to redo some of that work to get back to that level. And this is why acknowledging and appreciating your growth is so critical to recognizing how far you've come. It's taking that moment to understand that you actually did something to get to where you are today, especially when you're no longer on the starting line, when you've actually taken 3 and 4 laps around the track. Just because you seem to be standing at the same point that you started at doesn't mean that you're the same person that you were when you first started. Your muscles have grown, your mind has grown, you've developed over the exercise. The best way to see how far we have come is acknowledgement of our progress, acknowledgement of our growth, appreciation of our progress, and appreciation of our growth. There's really, at least in my opinion, I feel like there is no greater critic to who there's no greater critic to the mistakes that we have made in our lives than us. And because there is no greater critic to the mistakes that we made, because we know the ins and outs of who we are, there's no greater cheerleader if we allow ourselves to be in our lives than us. If we can acknowledge that, man, I made that, man, I did that, man, I didn't think I was going to do that, and I did that. And then appreciate the fact that we are no longer at that starting line and truly recognize how far we have come from when we were a child trying to figure our way out through the school politics to now we're adults trying to figure our way out through this adult adventure, which sometimes sucks, but it's still an adventure. But that is the power of this specific tool, is that we intimately know us, we intimately know our journey, we intimately know how we feel about things. And so when we take the time to acknowledge and appreciate our growth, we intimately can appreciate that. And that bonus tool kind of is what we can use as fuel to really propel us to our next level of growth. And it becomes not how far we have come, but how much further we have gone from each step to each step, each level to each level. So that's what I have for you guys tonight. Really quick to go over the tools. Tool number one, when it comes to how far you have come, is remember where you started. Again, we may start at one place, but when you take a quick glance back, you will see how far you are from it. If you have not done anything, you might still be at the starting line. So get started. If you have done some things, you might be a couple hundred feet away from the starting line. You might be a lifetime, what feels like a lifetime away from the starting line. But either way, remember where you started. Treat it as not an anchor, but as a measurement. Tool number two is maximize the present. Remember, the present is the only space that we have the opportunity to make input to. Can't input into the past, can't input into the future. Input your energy and your efforts into the present so that you're maximizing your opportunity for growth. And then tool number three is acknowledge and appreciate your growth. Again, we can be our worst critic, but we can be our greatest ally and our greatest cheerleader if we are willing to acknowledge and appreciate the growth that we have experienced over the course of our lives in multiple areas. So that's what I have for you guys tonight. As always with the Wednesday Word, I like to share a personal story, something that got me thinking about these topics. But actually, before I do, I'm sorry, Casual, what's going on? I seen you here in the chat. You said, how long does it take to write a Wednesday Word? That is something that it fluctuates. Sometimes I literally have an idea and it takes me 5 minutes to write a Wednesday Word because I'm very concise and clear on what the thought is. Sometimes it takes me a couple days. Sometimes it takes me a month. Like I'll write a topic and say, this is what I want to talk about. I know I want to talk about it, but it takes me a while to really filter out the tools that have helped me get to what that idea is. So it just takes, it depends on what it is. But this particular Wednesday Word, probably 15 minutes at the most for me to really go through where I was at. And as I share this story, you'll understand why it probably didn't take me as long. You said I used to I used to think one hand push-ups were nothing. Yeah, I used to think that too. Now I weigh 230 pounds. So I think it's something now if I do a one hand push-up. But as always with the Wednesday Word, I like to share a personal story. And so the story that got me thinking about this topic about how far you came was actually this past weekend. This was not originally the Wednesday Word topic I was going to do, but this past weekend, my calendar, my Google Photos sent me a thing saying, "Hey, 5 years ago, you were on the road to Utah," and 5 years ago is when I moved to Utah for an opportunity, and I started thinking about that journey from me living in California to moving to Utah. And one of the things that came across my mind was the fact that when I originally moved to Utah, um, I had been unemployed for about a month. And because of my financial situation, I didn't have a whole lot of money to make a move. I had some gas money to drive here, but I didn't have money to make an actual move to Utah. And I remember being in a position where I had to borrow money from a very close friend in order to get an Airbnb to stay at for 2 weeks. I think it was like $500 that I had to borrow. Um, and in that, it was like kind of like this humbling moment because here I have an opportunity to take a position with an organization that is going to definitely compensation wise improve my life. But then I later found that even the team that I worked with was a much healthier team for me to work on. Um, but I might have missed out on that opportunity for $500 because I wouldn't have been able to afford to stay in an Airbnb. And I don't know if you guys know about Utah in November, but it is ice cold snow in this month of in the month of November. So I wouldn't have been able to like, oh, I'll just sleep in my car and do what I need to do until I can get a place. That wouldn't have worked out here. But I think about where I was 5 years ago and not just where I was like mentally, where I was physically, where I was financially. I think about where I was really as the holistic person of who Billy Rowe is or who I am as Billy Rowe. Um, and there were some things that were great that I still carry with me today, but there were some things that were lacking. And over the past 5 years, which again, 5 years seems like a lot, but in 5 years, in your first 5 years of life, you're barely getting into school age. And in 5 years, how much my life has changed. But the reason why it has changed is because each step of whether it was writing a book, whether it was creating different YouTube content for intersations, whether it was networking with other YouTubers like Black Heights, whether it was traveling and seeing different places, whatever it was, each step of the way, I was pushing myself to grow, pushing myself to be stronger, pushing myself to be better, pushing myself to be a more effective communicator, pushing myself to be more reflective on the decisions that I'm making and seeing where they actually lead me to. And so now, when I fast forward from 5 years ago, moving from Utah, having to borrow money to get a space to stay in, to where I am now, where one, I don't have to borrow money. Two, I not only own the home that we live in, we also have two rentals. But three, being a what I would consider a beacon of light and inspiration on a completely different level than what I was. Like first row when I first moved to Utah, though I had done quite a bit of content in that previously to moving to Utah, it really was just a hobby. And I've stopped treating it as a hobby and started treating it more like a business and very much so more like a brand, because that's what this brand is about. First row, being on the first row where there's no distraction between yourself and the person presenting the information. And I love actually engaging with my own content, not in the sense of watching what I'm doing, but content where I bring other people up on, whether it's Terrell Michelle and Billy Rowe Live, or if it was Intersations. I love engaging with that content because there's always a lesson in it for me. Not oh well, that's of course the lesson. No, there's always a new lesson in it for me, because now that I've come around that track and I'm at the starting line again, I'm in a space where I am able to comprehend much more effectively the lessons that are sitting at this level. Even if I've passed them up once before, it's like, oh, that's how that applies. That's how that works. And yes, I am saying you need to move. If you can move, make that move, because moving out of the state of California was probably one of the best decisions I made for myself. And I can say that from the perspective of 5 years later. Uh, and I've had people tell me this: your life really took off after you left California. But part of that growth is because of the level of appreciation for each step in progress, like going from an Airbnb to an apartment. Like that was progress, and being able to say, man, okay, you did that. Okay, now you just sold your house. Now you got to buy a new house because you don't want to not own a home. Like the decisions that I've made have dramatically changed. Whereas before I used to just blow through money. Now I'm like, hey, this is the lifestyle level that I'm comfortable living at. I make this. If I make above that, that needs to go to savings, because there's another aspect about me. I'm not trying to work until 55. So that'll be the next thing about how far I come when I get to 55 and I'm able to say, hey, look, I'm done. I'm retiring. That'll be the next. Hey, look how far you came. You worked for 40 years and now you're done. Whew, let's make it happen. So that's what I got for you guys tonight. Really just be reflective of your journey, about where your journey started, and be intentional about where your journey is going. And the way you're intentional about that, again, is by maximizing the present and acknowledging how far you actually have come from where you started. If you guys knew Billy Rowe as a teenager, whew, that boy was a problem, and he has come very far as the man that I am today. So I thank you guys, as always, for your time. As always, if you have not gone to firstrow.com, go to firstrow.com and get your copy of Fire Your Job, Hire Your Passion. I'm trying to find my tech. There we go. Get your copy of Fire Your Job, Hire Your Passion. You can get the book and the journal. You can also download the very first chapter of the book, the full first chapter of the book, exclusively on firstrow.com. Check the book out, see if it's something you like, and then go from there. And then also, though we are not doing Carolyn Michelle and Billy Rowe live, it will be back in the beginning of the year on Fridays at 4 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. But you can catch Carolyn Michelle on the Grind to Find podcast this Friday at 4 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. That's anywhere that you consume podcasts, Spotify, Apple, whatever you consume it on. You will be able to find the Grind to Find podcast. You can also connect with Carolyn in her time off from the First Row at anywhere on social media, on Facebook, LinkedIn. Well, I'm not LinkedIn. I'm sorry. Facebook, Instagram, or YouTube at thegrindtofind.com. And you can always connect with me, whether it's at firstrow.com or on Facebook, Instagram, or YouTube, or LinkedIn at firstrow.com. Other than that, that is all I have for you guys this Wednesday. I am looking forward to some R&R. It's been a long day. As always, if you like this video, please share it. If you share it, please like it. I love engaging with you in the live chat. Thanks for joining me tonight live, Tiff. And I always appreciate you joining live when you can, casual. But if you are watching via the replay, I'm happy to engage with you for the first 7 days of the content is up. And then after that, I move on to the next content. But other than that, thank you guys for tuning in live. Until the next time, one love, peace, and God bless. Thanks for sitting on the first row.